For centuries, we have looked at maps and believed them to be accurate. But what if I told you that the map you grew up with is one of the biggest geographical lies in history? That Africa, one of the largest and most resource-rich continents on Earth, has been deliberately minimized on maps for centuries? This is not just a minor cartography issue. The way we see Africa affects geopolitics, economics, and even how Africa is perceived on the global stage. Today, we are going to uncover the great map deception, why Africa is much bigger than we think, and why it matters more than ever. To understand this deception, we must go back to the 16th century. In 1569, a Flemish cartographer named Gerardus Mercator designed a new world map. His goal? To help sailors navigate the high seas. But there was a problem. The Earth is a sphere, and he needed to fit it onto a flat surface. The Mercator projections stretched landmasses as they moved further from the equator. This made countries near the poles, like Greenland, Russia, Canada, and Europe, look much bigger than they really are. Meanwhile, landmasses near the equator, like Africa and South America, were compressed and shrunk. For example, on the Mercator map, Greenland looks almost the same size as Africa. But in reality, Africa is 14 times larger than Greenland. 14 times. The United Kingdom appears to rival Madagascar in size, when in reality, Madagascar is 2.5 times bigger than the entire UK. So how big is Africa, really? Let's break it down with actual numbers. Africa spans 30.3 million square kilometers, 11.7 million square miles. This makes it 3 times bigger than the United States. Larger than China, India, and the US combined. Bigger than all of Western Europe, Eastern Europe, and the Middle East combined. Large enough to fit Argentina, France, Germany, Spain, India, and the entire UK inside it, and still have space left over. Yet, if you ask most people, they would assume Africa is small, thanks to centuries of distorted maps and misinformation. But how did this false image of Africa become so widespread? It started in 1569 when Gerardus Mercator designed a map to help sailors navigate the oceans. His intention was practical, not political. But over the centuries, this distorted map became the standard in European education, shaping how entire generations saw the world. By the 18th and 19th centuries, the Mercator projection was no longer just a tool for navigation. It had become the official world map in European schools, newspapers, and political discussions. This meant that by the time the Berlin Conference, 1884–85, took place, where European powers divided Africa, most people had already been conditioned to see Africa as a much smaller, less significant place. During the scramble for Africa, European powers, mainly Britain, France, Belgium, Germany, and Portugal, raced to colonize the continent. The Mercator map reinforced the idea that Africa was small and manageable. It made it easier to justify colonization, reinforcing the idea that Africa was a land to be controlled rather than a vast, powerful continent. This deception has had lasting consequences. Ask yourself this: when you think of Africa, what images come to mind? Is it endless poverty, tribal conflict, and underdevelopment? Or do you think of vast cities, technological advancements, and rich cultures? The map distortion reinforced the narrative of a weak Africa, a place in need of help, rather than a continent of 54 countries, over 1.4 billion people, and some of the fastest growing economies on Earth. For decades, media and Western education systems have downplayed Africa's size and significance. But why? Because a smaller, weaker Africa is easier to exploit. So how do we fix this? First, we can start using accurate maps. The Gall-Peters projection represents landmasses in true proportion. Unlike the Mercator map, it doesn't shrink Africa or enlarge Europe artificially. Second, we must change how Africa is portrayed. Africa is not a small, poor continent. It is a geopolitical giant with abundant resources, rich cultures, and rising economic power. Finally, we must question the information we consume. If something as basic as a map has been misleading us for centuries, what else don't we know? The real size of Africa is not just about geography. It's about perception, history, and power. And it's time the world started seeing Africa for what it truly is, a giant not to be ignored. The real size of Africa is more than just a map correction. It's a challenge to rethink everything we've been told. Start by sharing this video. Help others see Africa as it truly is, not a small, struggling continent, but a vast, powerful force shaping the world. Use accurate maps like the Gall-Peters projection in your schools, offices, and discussions. Challenge media narratives that downplay Africa's significance. And if you're from Africa or have African heritage, remember, you are part of something far bigger than they ever wanted you to believe. Let's rewrite the narrative. Let's see Africa for what it truly is. Subscribe for more eye-opening documentaries, and let's keep uncovering the truth together.